Nicholas Nickleby was Dickens's third novel, and it was entirely planned, researched, written, and published during the time that Dickens lived in Doughty Street. It is, in fact, a Doughty Street novel. It has many of the exuberant qualities that are to be found in Pickwick, as well as some of the social outrage that is found in Oliver Twist. It was, of course, intended to be an attack on the cheap boarding schools up in the north of England, in Yorkshire particularly. But Nicholas's journey takes him through many strata of society and through many extraordinary adventures and escapades, among the most memorable of which is his encounter with the theatre, in the person of Mr. Vincent Crummles, actor, manager personified, and his truly extraordinary troupe and his rather remarkable range of items for the public to see. Othello, bits of it, no doubt, tumbling, juggling, the infant phenomenon, and strange interludes with savages and threatened maidens. It certainly was not, as one critic has quite correctly observed, the Royal Shakespeare Company. But Dickens loved it, every single aspect of it. He loved it at its lowest and its highest, and he loved the tawdriness of it, but also the extraordinary magic which sometimes could flow across the footlights. And here we have him in one of the most remarkable passages of the book, I think, where Nicholas and Smike go to the theatre, where this gentleman that they met the night before, this actor-manager, has invited them to come in order to join the troupe. He's never seen them act, but he's absolutely confident that they're the type that he needs. And so through Smike and Nicholas's eyes, we see the Theatre of Vincent Crummles. Chapter 22. It was not very light, but Nicholas found himself close to the first entrance on the prompt side, among bare walls, dusty scenes, mildewed clouds, heavily daubed draperies, and dirty floors. He looked about him. Ceiling, pit, boxes, gallery, orchestra, fittings and decorations of every kind, all looked coarse, cold, gloomy, and wretched. Is this a theatre? Whispered Smike in amazement. I thought it was a blaze of light and finery. Why, so it is, replied Nicholas, hardly less surprised. But not by day, Smike. Not by day. The manager's voice recalled him from a more careful inspection of the building to the opposite side of the proscenium, where, at a small mahogany table with rickety legs and of an oblong shape, sat a stout, portly female, apparently between 40 and 50, in a tarnished silk cloak, with her bonnet dangling by the strings in her hand, and her hair, of which she had a great quantity, braided in a large festoon over each temple. Mr. Johnson, said the manager, for Nicholas had given the name which Newman Noggs had bestowed upon him in his conversation with Mrs. Kenwigs, let me introduce Mrs. Vincent Crummles. I am glad to see you, sir, said Mrs. Vincent Crummles in a sepulchral voice. I am very glad to see you, and still more happy to hail you as a promising member of our corps. The lady shook Nicholas by the hand as she addressed him in these terms. He saw it was a large one, but had not expected quite such an iron grip as that with which she honoured him. And this, said the lady, crossing to Smike, as tragic actresses cross when they obey a stage direction. And this is the other. You too are welcome, sir. He'll do, I think, my dear, said the manager, taking a pinch of snuff. He is admirable, replied the lady. An acquisition indeed. As Mrs. Vincent Crummles recrossed back to the table, there bounded onto the stage from some mysterious inlet a little girl in a dirty white frock with tucks up to the knees, short trousers, sandalled shoes, white spencer, pink gauze bonnet, green veil, and curl papers, who turned a pirouette, cut twice in the air, turned another pirouette, then, looking off at the opposite wing, shrieked, bounded forward to within 6 inches of the footlights, and fell into a beautiful attitude of terror, as a shabby gentleman in an old pair of buff slippers came in at one powerful slide, and, chattering his teeth, fiercely brandished a walking stick. "They are going through the Indian savage and the maiden," said Mrs. Crummles. "Oh," said the manager, "the little ballet interlude. Very good, very good. Go on. A little this way, if you please, Mr. Johnson. That'll do. Now." The manager clapped his hands as a signal to proceed, and the savage, becoming ferocious, made a slide towards the maiden. But the maiden avoided him in 6 twirls, and came down at the end of the last one upon the very points of her toes. This seemed to make some impression upon the savage, for after a little more ferocity and chasing of the maiden into corners, he began to relent, and stroked his face several times with his right thumb and 4 fingers, thereby intimating that he was struck with admiration of the maiden's beauty. Acting upon the impulse of this passion, he, the savage, began to hit himself several thumps in the chest, and to exhibit other indications of being desperately in love, which, being a rather prosy proceeding, was very likely the cause of the maiden's falling asleep. Whether it was or no, asleep she did fall, sound as a church, on a sloping bank, and the savage, perceiving it, leant his left ear on his left hand, and nodded sideways to intimate to all it might concern that she was asleep, and no shamming. Being left to himself, the savage had a dance, all alone. Just as he left off, the maiden woke up, rubbed her eyes, got off the bank, and had a dance all alone too. Such a dance that the savage looked on in ecstasy all the while. And when it was done, plucked from a neighbouring tree some botanical curiosity resembling a small pickled cabbage, and offered it to the maiden, who at first wouldn't have it, but on the savage shedding tears, relented. Then the savage jumped for joy. Then the maiden jumped for rapture at the sweet smell of the pickled cabbage. Then the savage and maiden danced violently together, and finally the savage dropped down on one knee, and the maiden stood on one leg upon his other knee, thus concluding the ballet, and leaving the spectators in a state of pleasing uncertainty whether she would ultimately marry the savage or return to her friends. "Very well done, indeed," said Mr. Crummles. "Bravo!" "Bravo!" cried Nicholas, resolved to make the best of everything. "Beautiful!" "This, sir," said Mr. Vincent Crummles, bringing the maiden forward, "this is the infant phenomenon, Miss Ninetta Crummles." "Your daughter?" inquired Nicholas. "My daughter, replied Mr. Vincent Crummles, "the idol of every place we go into, sir. We have had complimentary letters about this girl, sir, from the nobility and gentry of almost every town in England." "I'm not at all surprised at that," said Nicholas. "She must be quite a natural genius." "Quite a... Mr. Crummles stopped. Language was not powerful enough to describe the infant phenomenon. "I'll tell you what, sir," he said, "the talent of this child is not to be imagined. She must be seen, sir. Seen, to be ever so faintly appreciated. There, go to your mother, my dear." "May I ask how old she is?" inquired Nicholas. "You may, sir," replied Mr. Crummles, looking steadily in his questioner's face, as some men do when they have doubts about being implicitly believed in what they're going to say. "She is 10 years of age, sir. Not more, not a day." "Dear me," said Nicholas. "It's extraordinary." It was. For the infant phenomenon, though of short stature, had a comparatively aged countenance, and had, moreover, been precisely the same age, not perhaps to the full extent of the memory of the oldest inhabitant, but certainly for 5 good years. But she had been kept up late every night, and put upon an unlimited allowance of gin and water from infancy to prevent her growing tall. And perhaps this system of training had produced in the infant phenomenon these additional phenomena. While this short dialogue was going on, the gentleman who had enacted the savage came up, with his walking shoes on his feet and his slippers in his hand, to within a few paces, as if desirous to join in the conversation. Deeming this a good opportunity, he put in his word. "Talent there, sir," said the savage, nodding towards Miss Crummles. Nicholas assented. "Ah," said the actor, setting his teeth together and drawing in his breath with a hissing sound. "She oughtn't to be in the provinces. She oughtn't." "What do you mean?" asked the manager. "I mean to say," replied the other warmly, "that she's too good for country boards, and that she ought to be in one of the large houses in London or nowhere. And I tell you more, without mincing the matter, that if it wasn't for envy and jealousy in some quarter that you know of, she would be. Perhaps you'll introduce me here, Mr. Crummles." "Mr. Folair," said the manager, presenting him to Nicholas. "Happy to know you, sir." Mr. Folair touched the brim of his hat with his forefinger and then shook hands. "A recruit, sir, I understand." "An unworthy one," replied Nicholas. "Did you ever see such a set-out as that?" whispered the actor, drawing him away, as Crummles left them to speak to his wife. As what?" Mr. Folair made a funny face from his pantomime collection and pointed over his shoulder. "You don't mean the infant phenomenon?" "Infant humbug, sir," replied Mr. Folair. "There isn't a female child of common sharpness in a charity school that couldn't do better than that. She may thank her stars she was born a manager's daughter." "You seem to take it to heart," observed Nicholas with a smile. "Yes, by Jove, and well I may," said Mr. Folair, drawing his arm through his and walking him up and down the stage. "Isn't it enough to make a man crusty to see that little sprawler put up in the best business every night, and actually keeping money out of the house by being forced down the people's throats while other people are passed over? Isn't it extraordinary to see a man's confounded family conceit blinding him, even to his own interest? Why, I know the 15 and 6pence that came to Southampton one night last month to see me dance the Highland Fling. And what's the consequence? I've never been put up in it since. Never once. While the infant phenomenon has been grinning through artificial flowers at 5 people and a baby in the pit and 2 boys in the gallery every night." "If I may judge from what I have seen of you," said Nicholas, "you must be a valuable member of the company." "Oh," replied Mr. Folair, beating his slippers together to knock the dust out, "I can come it pretty well. Nobody better, perhaps, in my own line. But having such business as one gets here is like putting lead on one's feet instead of chalk, and dancing in fetters without the credit of it. Hello, old fella, how are you?"